Picture this. It's a foggy dawn in 3500 BCE, and you're standing on what will one day become the rolling hills of England. But right now, it's a wild, untamed landscape where mysterious people are dragging massive stones across the countryside. They not building just any monument. They recreating something that will puzzle humanity for over 5,000 years. What drives these ancient souls to move stones without any modern machinery? Tonight, we'll uncover their secrets together. Welcome to Sleep Mora. Tonight, let me guide you through a gentle story from history. Close your eyes, relax, and let the past carry you to a peaceful sleep. Now, let me ask you something that we'll return to later. What do you think motivated ancient people to spend generations building monuments they'd never see completed? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one and love hearing your perspectives. Our story begins not with kings or battles, but with footprints in the mud. Around 950,000 years ago, in what we now call Happisburgh on England's Norfolk coast, someone walked along a muddy shoreline. These weren't modern humans yet, but an earlier cousin, Homo antecessor. Their footprints, preserved in ancient mud, represent some of the earliest evidence of humans in what would become England. Imagine these early wanderers moving through a landscape that would be completely alien to us today. England was an island then. It was connected to continental Europe by a vast land bridge called Doggerland. Massive mammoths thundered across plains where the North Sea now rolls. Saber-toothed cats prowled through forests where London's skyscrapers now gleam. These first inhabitants were nomads, following herds and seasons, crafting simple tools from flint and bone. They lived entirely in the present moment. No grand plans, no monuments, just the eternal human drive to survive and explore. There's something deeply peaceful about imagining their simple existence. Waking with the sun, following game trails, gathering around fires under star-filled skies, unpolluted by any artificial light. The climate shifted dramatically during these early millennia. Ice ages came and went like slow geological breathing. Sometimes ice sheets advanced so far south that early humans had to abandon Britain entirely, retreating to warmer continental refuges. Other times, the climate warmed enough that hippos wallowed in the Thames where Big Ben now stands. Around 500,000 years ago, more sophisticated early humans arrived. At Boxgrove, in Sussex, archaeologists discovered beautifully crafted hand axes, tools, so perfectly symmetrical and functional that they represent humanity's first great technological achievement. These weren't crude attempts at tool-making. They were masterpieces of Stone Age engineering, each one requiring hundreds of precise strikes to create. Close your eyes and imagine holding one of these ancient hand axes. Feel its weight, perfectly balanced in your palm. The maker spent hours, perhaps days, carefully shaping each edge. This wasn't just about making a tool. It was about creating something beautiful. Something that would outlast the maker by hundreds of thousands of years. Even in humanity's earliest days, we were artists as much as survivors. As the last great ice age reached its peak around 20,000 years ago, Britain became largely uninhabitable. Glaciers buried much of what is now Scotland and northern England under ice sheets, sometimes a mile thick. The few humans who remained clung to ice-free refuges in southern regions, living in small bands, crafting increasingly sophisticated tools, and developing the skills that would serve their descendants well. But then, gradually, the ice began to retreat. This wasn't a sudden event. It took thousands of years. As the massive ice sheets melted, they released unimaginable volumes of water, carving new rivers and valleys, creating the landscape we recognize today. The retreating ice left behind a scraped raw land ready for recodify. Around 15,000 years ago, the first post-glacial pioneers began moving back into Britain. These Mesolithic people, the Middle Stone Age folk, were remarkably sophisticated hunter-gatherers. They developed new technologies perfectly adapted to the warming, forested landscape that was emerging from the ice. One of the most remarkable Mesolithic sites is Starcar in Yorkshire, where archaeologists discovered a settlement dating to around 9,000 BCE. What makes Starcar so special isn't just its age, but what it reveals about these ancient people's daily lives. They crafted elaborate headdresses from red deer antlers, possibly for ritual use, or perhaps as hunting camouflage. They carved barbed harpoons from antler, designed sophisticated fish traps, and even created what might be the world's oldest known house. Picture yourself at Starcar on a misty morning 11,000 years ago. Smoke rises from carefully tended fires. Families work together, preparing the day's tools. Some knapping flint into precise microliths. Others weaving nets from plant fibers. Children play with carved toys while learning the skills they'll need to survive. Elders share stories that preserve generations of accumulated wisdom about reading weather, tracking animals, and finding the best seasonal resources. These Mesolithic people developed what archaeologists call the broad spectrum economy. Instead of focusing on hunting large game, they exploited every available resource. They gathered hazelnuts in autumn, storing them in carefully dug pits, caught fish with sophisticated traps, hunted birds with bow and arrow, and collected shellfish along the coasts. Their seasonal rounds took them across vast territories, following resources as they became available throughout the year. Around 4000 BCE, something extraordinary happened in Britain. New people arrived from continental Europe, bringing with them revolutionary ideas that would transform the landscape forever. These Neolithic people, the new Stone Age folk, brought farming, pottery, and most importantly, a completely different way of thinking about the world. The transition from hunting and gathering to farming wasn't just about food production. It was a fundamental shift in human consciousness. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had moved through the landscape as part of it. Now, for the first time, people began to actively reshape the land to serve their purposes. The earliest Neolithic farmers cleared forests using stone axes, creating the first fields in Britain's history. They domesticated cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs, animals that had been wild prey for countless generations. They planted wheat and barley, learned to store surplus grain, and established the first permanent settlements. But perhaps most remarkably, these Neolithic people began building monuments that would endure for millennia. The earliest were simple burial chambers called dolmens, massive stone slabs, carefully arranged to create sacred spaces for the dead. These weren't just graves. They were statements about permanence, community, identity, and humanity's relationship with the divine. At Carrowmore in Ireland, which had strong cultural connections to Britain, archaeologists have found megalithic tombs dating to 4000 BCE, among the oldest stone monuments in Europe. These tombs required enormous community effort to build. Imagine dozens of families working together, organizing the quarrying, transport, and precise placement of multi-ton stones. This level of cooperation suggests complex social structures, shared beliefs, and long-term planning that would have been impossible for nomadic hunter-gatherers. One of the most mysterious aspects of these early monuments is their astronomical alignments. Many dolmens and passage graves are oriented precisely toward sunrise or sunset on significant dates like the winter solstice. This suggests these ancient people possessed sophisticated knowledge of celestial cycles and saw deep connections between earthly life and cosmic rhythms. Think about what this means. 6,000 years ago, someone stood in a field in ancient Britain, carefully observing the sun's path across the sky throughout the year, noting exactly where it rose and set on the shortest day, then organizing an entire community to build a massive stone monument aligned to capture that moment of cosmic significance. They were creating architecture that would frame the sun itself, turning the landscape into a kind of calendar written in stone. As Neolithic communities established themselves across Britain, they began creating some of the most intriguing monuments in British prehistory: causewayed enclosures. These were large circular areas enclosed by discontinuous ditches and banks, with multiple entrances or causeways crossing the earthworks. The most famous of these is Windmill Hill, near Avebury, in Wiltshire. Built around 3700 BCE from the air, these enclosures look like giant crop circles, but their purpose remains one of archaeology's most fascinating puzzles. They weren't permanent settlements. They show little evidence of daily occupation. They weren't defensive. The interrupted ditches and multiple entrances would have been useless for protection. Instead, these enclosures seem to have been seasonal gathering places where scattered farming communities came together for trade, ceremonies, and social bonding. Imagine the excitement of a Neolithic family preparing to visit Windmill Hill. They would load their possessions onto sleds or carry them in baskets, traveling for days across the downs to reach this special place. When they arrived, they would find hundreds of other families from across the region. Children would play together while adults exchanged pottery, flint tools, and precious materials like jade axes from distant Cornwall. Young people would meet potential marriage partners from other communities. Elders would share stories and settle disputes. Shamans or priests would conduct ceremonies to ensure good harvests and favorable weather. Archaeological evidence from these sites tells remarkable stories. At Windmill Hill, excavators found pottery sherds from vessels deliberately broken and scattered, possibly as part of ritual feasting where the breaking of pots marked special occasions. They found deposits of human skulls, carefully placed in the ditches, suggesting these were also sites for honoring ancestors. Most intriguingly, they found evidence that these gatherings involved massive communal feasts. Analysis of animal bones shows that hundreds of cattle, sheep, and pigs were butchered and consumed during these events. For communities where meat was normally a rare luxury, these gathering times must have been periods of extraordinary abundance and celebration. While causewayed enclosures served a living, Neolithic people were simultaneously creating spectacular monuments for the dead. Long barrows, elongated earthen mounds covering stone burial chambers, began appearing across Britain around 3700 BCE. These weren't simple graves. They were architectural masterpieces that required months or years to complete. West Kennet Long Barrow in Wiltshire, completed around 3650 BCE, remains one of the finest examples. This massive mound stretches for 330 feet and reaches 8 feet in height. But the earthwork is only part of the story. Hidden within is a sophisticated stone chamber with 5 separate burial areas, each carefully designed for different types of remains. What makes these monuments so emotionally powerful is what they reveal about Neolithic beliefs about death and memory. These weren't places where bodies were buried once and forgotten. Archaeological evidence shows that these chambers remained active for centuries, with communities regularly opening them to add new remains, rearrange existing bones, and remove some for use in ceremonies elsewhere. The bones tell remarkable stories. about Neolithic funeral practices. Rather than burying complete bodies, these people practiced excarnation, allowing bodies to decompose naturally before collecting the bones for final burial. Some bones show cut marks, suggesting they were deliberately cleaned. Others show evidence of having been painted with red ochre, a sacred pigment used in burials for tens of thousands of years. Imagine being part of a Neolithic community when an elder died. The body would first be placed on a wooden platform or in a special hut, protected but exposed to natural decomposition. The community would tend to this process, perhaps conducting regular ceremonies as the flesh gradually returned to the earth. After months or years, when only bones remained, there would be another ceremony to collect these remains and carry them to the long barrow for final placement. The entrance to these barrows was often marked by massive stone portals, creating a clear boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the ancestors. Picture yourself approaching West Kennet Long Barrow at dawn, carrying the carefully cleaned bones of a beloved grandmother. The massive stones frame the entrance like the doorway to another world. Inside, the chambers echo with whispered prayers and the soft sound of bones being arranged alongside generations of ancestors. Not all of ancient Britain's remarkable achievements were built from stone. In the Somerset Levels, a vast area of marshland in southwestern England, Neolithic people created one of the world's oldest known timber trackways. The Sweet Track, built in 3807 BCE, precisely dated through tree rings, represents sophisticated engineering that solved the practical problem of crossing treacherous wetlands. But the Sweet Track was unjust functional. It reveals the remarkable environmental knowledge and social organization of Neolithic communities. Building this raised wooden walkway required detailed understanding of local timber resources, precise carpentry skills, and careful coordination among multiple communities. The track was constructed using a clever system of wooden rails, supported by crossed wooden pegs driven into the marsh. Planks were then laid across these rails to create a walkway that could support people and their loads, while keeping them above the dangerous bog. The entire structure stretched for over a mile, connecting dry land on either side of the marsh. What makes the Sweet Track especially significant is what archaeologists found along its length. Votive offerings, precious objects deliberately deposited in the water, suggest this was merely a practical walkway, but also a sacred path with ritual significance. People walking across the marsh would pause to offer jade axes, pottery, and wooden objects to the water spirits. Imagine making this journey in 3807 BCE. You recarrying trade goods, perhaps pottery or flint tools, from your community to markets on the other side of the marsh. The morning mist rises from the dark water as you step onto the wooden planks. Each step echoes across the water. You pause halfway across to drop a small clay figurine into the bog, an offering to ensure safe passage and good fortune in your trade. The Somerset levels preserve other trackways too, showing that this engineering tradition continued for over a millennium. Each generation rebuilt and improved upon their ancestors' work, creating an increasingly sophisticated network of wooden roads through the wetlands. This represents one of humanity's earliest systematic approaches to infrastructure development, the beginning of the long tradition of engineering that would eventually create Britain's Roman roads, medieval bridges, and modern motorways. Among the most mysterious monuments of Neolithic Britain are the cursus sites, vast linear earthworks that stretch across the landscape for miles. The name comes from 18th century antiquarians who thought they looked like Roman racecourses. But their true purpose remains one of archaeology's great puzzles. The Dorset cursus, built around 3500 BCE, is the longest prehistoric monument in Britain, stretching for over 6 miles across Cranbourne Chase. This massive earthwork consists of parallel ditches and banks, creating a corridor across the landscape. Construction would have required coordinated effort from hundreds of people over many years. Standing at one end of the Dorset cursus today, you can barely see the other end. It disappears beyond the horizon, an ancient pathway leading into mystery. Recent research suggests these monuments may have been processional ways, routes for sacred journeys that connected important sites across the landscape. The cursus monuments reveal sophisticated understanding of landscape and geometry. They're not built in straight lines, but follow subtle curves that take advantage of natural topography, creating dramatic visual effects as they rise and fall across hills and valleys. Their builders understood how to create monuments that would work with the landscape rather than against it. Archaeological evidence suggests these sites were used for generations, with people regularly walking their entire length during seasonal ceremonies. Imagine being part of a community procession along the Dorset cursus. Hundreds of people walking together, carrying offerings, singing ancient songs, following a path their great-grandparents had helped create. The journey itself becomes a meditation, a way of connecting with ancestors and landscapes simultaneously. Some cursus sites are aligned with astronomical phenomena, suggesting they served as landscape-scale calendars. The cursus at Thornborough in Yorkshire aligns with a rising of the star cluster known as Orion's Belt, connecting earthly ceremonies with cosmic cycles. These monuments transformed entire landscapes into sacred spaces, places where human communities could participate in the greater rhythms of the universe. Now, as we pause in our journey through ancient Britain, I want to return to that question I asked earlier. What do you think motivated these ancient people to spend generations building monuments they never see completed? We've walked together through 4,000 years of prehistory, from the first farmers to the builders of massive cursus monuments. We've seen communities repeatedly choosing to invest enormous time and effort in projects that served purposes beyond immediate survival. Generation, they quarried stones, moved earth, and created monuments that would outlast their builders by millennia. I find myself wondering about their sense of time, their understanding of legacy. In our modern world, we often focus on immediate results, quarterly reports, annual goals, but these ancient people were thinking in centuries, planning for grandchildren they'd never meet, creating gifts for future generations who would inherit landscapes transformed by their ancestors' vision. Take a moment to think about this, and please share your thoughts in the comments. What drives humans to build for the future? What did these ancient monuments mean to the people who created them? I'm genuinely curious about your perspectives, and I love the discussions that emerge in our comment community. If you're finding yourself drawn into these ancient stories, I'd be grateful if you took a moment to like this video. Your engagement helps more people discover these gentle historical journeys. And it tells me that you'd like to see more content like this. Around 3200 BCE, a new type of monument began appearing across Britain: the henge. These circular earthworks with banks on the outside and ditches on the inside created sacred spaces that would define British prehistory for the next 2 millennia. Unlike practical fortifications, henges had their defenses facing inward, suggesting they were designed to contain something sacred rather than keep enemies out. The earliest henges were relatively simple: circular ditches and banks with 1 or 2 entrances. But they reveal a fundamental shift in Neolithic thinking about sacred space. Instead of monuments focused on the dead, like long barrows, or seasonal gatherings, like causewayed enclosures, henges created permanent sacred spaces for the living community. Mayberg Henge in Cumbria, built around 3000 BCE, gives us insight into how these early monuments worked. This massive circular bank, built from thousands of tons of cobblestones, encloses an area large enough to hold several hundred people. The single entrance creates a sense of arrival, of crossing from ordinary landscape into sacred space. Inside these henges, communities conducted ceremonies we can only imagine. Archaeological evidence suggests activities included feasting, craft production, and rituals involving fire and water. At some sites, excavators have found evidence of wooden structures inside the henges, perhaps stages for performances, altars for offerings, or shelters for sacred objects. The social implications of henge building are profound. These monuments required unprecedented levels of community coordination. Unlike long barrows, which served extended family groups, or cursus monuments, which might have been built by regional confederations, henges seem to have been local community projects. Each group of villages would have had their own henge, a place that defined their shared identity and served as the center of their ritual life. Picture a community gathering inside Mayberg Henge on a summer evening 5,000 years ago. Families arrive carrying food for a communal feast. Craftspeople display their finest pottery and tools. Musicians play simple drums and flutes. Storytellers share tales that preserve the community's history and values. Children play games while learning the customs that will define their adult lives. As the evening progresses, ceremonies begin. Perhaps there are rituals to mark the changing seasons, prayers for successful harvests, or coming Vogue ceremonies for young people. The circular space creates intimacy even within large gatherings. Everyone can see everyone else, reinforcing the sense of community that makes cooperation possible. Around 2500 BCE, another revolutionary change swept across Britain. Metalworking technology arrived from continental Europe, introducing the first copper tools and weapons. This was on just a technological shift. It marked the beginning of social stratification on a scale previously unknown in Britain. The Amesbury archer, discovered near Stonehenge in 2002, embodies this transformation. Buried around 2300 BCE with over 100 grave goods, including copper knives, gold ornaments, and archery equipment. He represents the emergence of individual wealth and status in British society. Isotope analysis of his teeth shows he grew up in the Alpine region of Europe, suggesting the new technologies came with new people who possessed specialized knowledge. This period, sometimes called the Copper Age or Chalcolithic, saw the appearance of Britain's first metal objects. Copper axes, identical to those found across Europe, show that Britain was now part of a continental trading network. These early metal tools were unnecessarily superior to stone implements. A well-made flint axe could be sharper and more durable than early copper ones. But metal had symbolic power. It could be melted and reformed, recycled in ways stone never could. It gleamed in the firelight. It represented mastery over elemental forces. The social implications were enormous. Metalworking required specialized knowledge, access to rare raw materials, and control over trade networks. For the first time in British prehistory, some individuals could accumulate wealth and status beyond what farming and hunting could provide. The egalitarian societies of early Neolithic Britain were giving way to more hierarchical structures. This transformation is visible in changing burial practices. Earlier Neolithic people had practiced collective burial in long barrows, emphasizing community over individual identity. But Copper Age graves increasingly contained individual burials with personal possessions, suggesting new ideas about individual identity and private property. The beaker culture, named after distinctive pottery vessels found in graves across Europe, played a key role in this transformation. Beaker pottery shows remarkable standardization across vast distances, suggesting shared cultural practices among metal-using elites. These were unjust drinking cups. They were symbols of membership in an exclusive cultural network that transcended local boundaries. No discussion of ancient Britain would be complete without exploring Stonehenge, perhaps the most famous prehistoric monument in the world. But Stonehenge wasn't built all at once. It evolved over 1,500 years, reflecting changing beliefs, technologies, and social structures. The earliest Stonehenge, built around 3100 BCE, was a simple henge monument, a circular ditch and bank with an entrance facing northeast toward the midsummer sunrise. Inside this circle, Neolithic people erected a ring of wooden posts. The first Stonehenge was made of wood, not stone. This early monument already showed the astronomical alignment that would define Stonehenge throughout its history. On midsummer morning, the sun rises directly over the heel stone, creating a moment of cosmic drama that has captivated humans for over 5,000 years. Standing inside the circle at dawn on June 21st, watching the sun appear precisely over the ancient marker stone, you participate in a ceremony older than any surviving religion. Around 2600 BCE, the monument was dramatically rebuilt. The famous trilithons, massive stone archways composed of two uprights capped by a horizontal lintel, were erected in the center. These weren't local stones. The smaller blue stones came from Wales, over 150 miles away. The larger sarsen stones, some weighing 50 tons, were dragged from the Marlborough Downs, 20 miles to the north. The logistics of this construction project boggle the mind. Moving a 50-ton stone 20 miles using Neolithic technology would have required hundreds of people working in coordination for weeks. They would have needed to construct roads, build special sleds or rollers, and organize food and shelter for the work crews. The blue stone transport from Wales represents an even greater feat. These stones were somehow moved across land and water, possibly by boat, down the Welsh coast and up British rivers. But why go to such extraordinary effort? Recent research suggests Stonehenge was designed as a calendar in stone, a device for tracking the complex cycles of sun and moon across the years. The monument's geometry encodes sophisticated astronomical knowledge, allowing ancient astronomers to predict eclipses, track seasonal changes, and maintain accurate, long-term calendars. More than that, Stonehenge seems to have been designed to create specific acoustic effects. Experiments show that sounds made inside the circle are amplified and focused in remarkable ways. The stone circle acts like a prehistoric concert hall, designed to enhance music, speeches, and ritual activities. Around 2200 BCE, bronze working technology reached Britain, ushering in the Bronze Age proper. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, was superior to pure copper in every way. It was harder, more durable, and could be cast into complex shapes impossible with stone tools. The tin needed for bronze came primarily from Cornwall, giving Britain a crucial role in European metal trade. This technological revolution coincided with dramatic social changes. Bronze Age Britain saw the emergence of warrior elites, evidenced by elaborate graves containing bronze weapons, gold ornaments, and symbols of military power. The Bush Barrow burial near Stonehenge, dating to around 1900 BCE, contained a bronze axe, copper daggers, and a remarkable gold breastplate that marks its owner as someone of extraordinary status. Bronze weapons changed the nature of conflict in prehistoric Britain. Bronze spears and axes were far more effective than stone weapons, giving advantages to groups that could afford them. This created positive feedback loops where successful warriors could accumulate wealth, acquire better weapons, and achieve even greater success in battle. Trade networks became increasingly important and sophisticated. British bronze axes have been found across Europe, while European bronze work appears in British hoards. Amber from the Baltic, gold from Ireland, and bronze from Britain circulated through complex networks that connected communities across vast distances. The famous mold cape, a spectacular gold ceremonial garment found in Wales, demonstrates the artistic sophistication achieved by Bronze Age craftspeople. This intricate gold work, dating to around 1900 to 1600 BCE, required hundreds of hours of skilled labor and represents wealth almost beyond comprehension for prehistoric societies. Bronze Age communities also began creating increasingly elaborate monuments. Stone circles became more geometrically precise and astronomically sophisticated. The recumbent stone circles of Scotland, with their carefully placed horizontal stones framing celestial events, show mathematical understanding that rivals any ancient civilization. Before we continue deeper into the Bronze Age, I want to take a moment to connect with you, our gentle history community. We've been journeying together through over 4,000 years of ancient Britain. From the first farmers to the sophisticated bronze-working societies. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who appreciates history's quieter stories. The human moments that don't make it into traditional textbooks. This is exactly the kind of content I love creating for this channel. Stories that help you see the past as a place where real people lived, loved, struggled, and dreamed, just as we do today. If tonight's journey through ancient Britain is giving you that sense of connection to our ancestors, I'd be so grateful if you take a moment to like this video and consider subscribing to join our growing community of gentle history lovers. I'm also genuinely curious about your thoughts as we've moved through these different periods. What aspects of ancient British life resonate most with you? Are you drawn to the mystery of the monument builders, the ingenuity of the bronze workers, or something else entirely? Your comments truly enrich these videos. They help me understand what stories matter most to you, and they create wonderful discussions that extend far beyond the video itself. If you know someone else who might enjoy these peaceful historical journeys, sharing this video would mean the world to me. There's something special about discovering history together, and your recommendations help build our community of people who believe the past has gentle wisdom to offer the present. Now, let's return to ancient Britain, where profound changes are about to reshape the landscape once again. As Bronze Age society matured, communities began implementing landscape changes that would endure for millennia. Around 1500 BCE, systematic field systems appeared across Britain, dividing the landscape into managed agricultural units that reveal sophisticated understanding of land use and property rights. The best preserved examples survive on Dartmoor in Devon, where stone walls still mark field boundaries established 3,500 years ago. These reeves, as archaeologists call them, stretch for miles across the moorland, creating a fossilized Bronze Age landscape that shows how communities organized agricultural space. These field systems weren't random. They reflect careful planning that balanced individual family needs with community cooperation. Each family received plots of different types, some on fertile valley floors for grain crops, others on hillsides for grazing, still others near water sources for livestock. The system ensured that no single family could monopolize the best land, while guaranteeing everyone access to the resources they needed for survival. The social implications are profound. Creating and maintaining these field systems required unprecedented levels of community agreement and coordination. Disputes over boundaries, water rights, and grazing privileges had to be resolved through legal systems we can only imagine. For the first time in British history, we see evidence of formal property law governing land use. Walking across Dartmoor today, you can still see the Bronze Age landscape frozen in stone. The ancient field walls march across hillsides in straight lines, occasionally interrupted by stone circles that served as meeting places where community decisions were made. Roundhouses, their stone foundations still visible, cluster near water sources and fertile plots. Imagine being a Bronze Age farmer walking out to check your fields on a misty Dartmoor morning. You know exactly which plots belong to your family because the boundaries have been established by community agreement and marked with permanent stone walls. You understand the complex rotation schedules that ensure soil fertility. You participate in seasonal gatherings where the community makes decisions about shared resources like pastures and water sources. Around 1000 BCE, as the Bronze Age gave way to the Iron Age, a new type of monument began appearing across Britain: the hill fort. These defensive settlements, built on prominent hilltops and surrounded by massive earthworks, mark a fundamental shift in British society toward more organized warfare and territorial control. Maiden Castle in Dorset represents hill fort building at its most sophisticated. This enormous fortress, with multiple rings of ditches and ramparts covering 47 acres, could have housed thousands of people during times of danger. The complexity of its defenses, with carefully designed entrances, overlapping fields of fire, and obstacles to slow attackers, shows military engineering skills that rival medieval castle builders. But hill forts weren't just military installations. They were also economic and social centers that served as markets, craft production sites, and meeting places for surrounding agricultural communities. During peaceful times, the interiors contained workshops where blacksmiths forged iron tools, potters created increasingly sophisticated vessels, and weavers produced textiles for trade. The emergence of hill forts reflects increasing social complexity and competition in Iron Age Britain. Population growth, climate change, and pressure on agricultural resources led to more frequent conflicts between communities. Groups that could build and maintain effective hill forts gained significant advantages in controlling territory and trade routes. Archaeological evidence shows that hill forts were occupied seasonally rather than permanently, during harvest time and other vulnerable periods. Farming communities would retreat to the safety of the hill forts, bringing their livestock and stored grain with them. The rest of the year, they live in undefended villages and farmsteads scattered across the surrounding landscape. The scale of hill fort construction reveals the organizational capabilities of Iron Age communities. Building maiden castles, defenses required coordinated labor from hundreds of people over many seasons. Community leaders had to organize work crews, manage food supplies for workers, and coordinate defense strategies. These weren't simple tribal societies. They were complex polities capable of large-scale planning and execution. As Iron Age society developed, so did its spiritual systems. Classical writers like Caesar and Pliny describe a sophisticated religious hierarchy centered on druids, priests, scholars who served as judges, teachers, healers, and intermediaries with the divine world. While we must be cautious about Roman accounts of Celtic religion, archaeological evidence confirms the existence of complex spiritual practices centered on natural, sacred groves, played crucial roles in Iron Age religion. Unlike the stone monuments of earlier periods, these natural temples left little archaeological trace, but they were central to Celtic spiritual life. Ancient writers describe ceremonies conducted in oak groves, where druids gathered mistletoe with golden sickles and conducted rituals involving human sacrifice. Anglesey, known to the Romans as Mona, served as the primary druidical center for Britain. This Welsh island contained sacred groves where druids from across Britain gathered for training and ceremonies. When the Romans finally conquered Anglesey in 60 CE, they deliberately destroyed these groves, recognizing them as centers of resistance to Roman rule. The Druids served multiple functions in Iron Age society. They were judges who memorized complex legal codes, astronomers who maintained calendars and predicted eclipses, healers who understood the medicinal properties of plants, and historians who preserved tribal genealogies and traditions through oral poetry. This concentration of knowledge and authority made them powerful figures in Celtic society. Archaeological evidence for druidical practices comes primarily from votive deposits, valuable objects deliberately thrown into rivers, lakes, and bogs as offerings to water deities, and ornaments that were deliberately deposited in sacred ceremonies. By the time Julius Caesar first invaded Britain in 55 BCE, the island was home to dozens of distinct Celtic tribes, each with their own territories, customs, and political systems. These weren't primitive societies. They were sophisticated political entities with complex social hierarchies, extensive trade networks, and remarkable artistic traditions. The Iceni of East Anglia, led by the legendary Queen Boudica, controlled rich agricultural lands and maintained extensive trade connections with continental Europe. Their beautiful gold torques, twisted metal neck rings worn by nobles, demonstrate metalworking skills that rival any ancient civilization. Each torque required months of skilled labor and represented wealth equivalent to dozens of cattle or years of agricultural surplus. The Brigantes controlled the largest territory in Britain, stretching across much of northern England. Their hill forts, like Stanwig in Yorkshire, could house thousands of people and served as centers of political power that coordinated activities across vast regions. The Brigantine Federation demonstrates how Iron Age communities could unite under shared leadership while maintaining local autonomy. In the southwest, the Dumnone controlled Cornwall's tin mines, making them wealthy partners in Mediterranean trade networks. Cornish tin was essential for bronze production across Europe, giving these communities influence far beyond their geographical size. Their coastal settlements show evidence of direct trade with Roman merchants, Gaulish traders, and even Mediterranean wine merchants. The Catavellani, based in what is now Hertfordshire, became the most powerful tribe in southern Britain during the decades before Roman conquest. Under leaders like Cunobelinas, Shakespeare's Cymbeline, they established proturban settlements, minted their own coins, and maintained diplomatic relations with Rome. Their capital at Camulodunum, modern Colchester, was essentially a Celtic city, with planned streets, specialized workshops, and monumental architecture. These tribal societies weren't isolated from each other or from the wider European world. Marriage alliances, trade partnerships, and military confederations linked communities across vast distances. A nobleman from the Scottish Highlands might wear ornaments made in Ireland, weapons forged in continental Europe, and jewelry crafted in southern England. Celtic Britain was part of an interconnected European cultural sphere that stretched from Ireland to Turkey. In the final centuries before Roman conquest, some Celtic communities began creating settlements that archaeologists call oppida, proto-urban centers that combine residential, commercial, and industrial functions on an unprecedented scale. These weren't simply large hillforts. They were planned communities that represent Britain's first experiment with urban living. Camulodunum, Colchester, exemplifies this development. By 50 BCE, it covered over 1,000 acres and housed several thousand people. The settlement had defined districts for different activities. Metalworking areas were blacksmiths and bronze. Casters operated sophisticated workshops. Residential quarters with substantial timber houses. Commercial areas where traders exchanged goods from across Europe, and ceremonial spaces for religious and political gatherings. The layout of these oppida shows sophisticated urban planning. Streets were laid out in roughly regular patterns. Drainage systems managed waste, and rainwater and public spaces provided venues for community gatherings. Some settlements even had what appear to be public buildings, large structures that served administrative or ceremonial functions for the entire community. Coin production, which began in Britain around 100 BCE, was centered in these proto-urban settlements. British Celtic coins weren't just currency. They were also political statements, carrying portraits of rulers and symbols of tribal identity. The sophisticated die cutting required for coin production indicates the presence of highly skilled craftspeople working under royal patronage. These oppida also served as centers of long-distance trade. Excavations reveal pottery from Gaul, wine amphorae from the Mediterranean, amber from the Baltic, and raw materials from across Britain. Merchants from Rome established permanent trading posts in some settlements, creating cultural mixing that prepared the way for eventual Roman conquest. Walking through one of these oppida in 50 BCE would have been a sensory experience unlike anything previous in British history. The air would be filled with smoke from metalworking fires, the sounds of hammers on anvils, and conversations in multiple languages. Merchants would be displaying exotic goods, Mediterranean wine, continental pottery, precious metals from distant mines. Children would be playing in streets while learning the skills they'd need as adults in this increasingly complex society. Iron Age Britain produced some of the most beautiful art in prehistoric Europe. The Lost Isle, named after a site in Switzerland, where it was first identified, reached extraordinary heights of sophistication in British hands. This was an art for art's sake. It was symbolic communication that encoded complex messages about status, identity, and spiritual beliefs. The Battersea Shield, pulled from the Thames near London, exemplifies Celtic artistic achievement. This bronze shield, decorated with elaborate swirling patterns and red glass inlays, was never meant for battle. It was a ceremonial object designed to display wealth and artistic sophistication. The mathematical precision of its spirals and the subtle variations in its symmetry show artistic understanding that would challenge even modern designers. Celtic metalworkers developed techniques for creating objects of extraordinary beauty and complexity. The Snettisham torques from Norfolk, dating to around 75 BCE, include neck rings made from twisted gold wire, so fine it resembles rope. Creating such objects require not only artistic vision, but also engineering skills to manage the physical properties of gold under extreme manipulation. The recurring motifs in Celtic art, spirals, triskells, stylized animals, and interlaced patterns, weren't merely decorative. They encoded spiritual and political meanings we can only partially understand. Spirals might represent the cycles of seasons, life and death, or the movement of celestial bodies. Animal forms often combined features from different creatures, creating mythological beings that connected earthly and spiritual realms. Manuscript illumination, though it wouldn't reach full flower until the medieval period, had its roots in Iron Age artistic traditions. The complex interlaced patterns that would later adorn the Book of Kells and Lindisfarne Gospels evolved from motifs first developed by Iron Age metalworkers and stone carvers. This artistic tradition also appears in stone sculpture. The Turo stone in Ireland and similar monuments in Britain show how Celtic artists adapted their metalworking aesthetics to stone carving. These monuments served as territorial markers and spiritual focal points, transforming landscapes into galleries of symbolic art. Even before Roman armies landed on British shores, Roman influence was transforming Celtic society. Decades of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange had already begun changing British communities in fundamental ways. Some tribal leaders actively sought Roman alliance, while others organized resistance to what they saw as foreign corruption of traditional ways. Archaeological evidence shows increasing Roman material culture in British settlements during the century before conquest. Roman pottery, wine, amphory, and luxury goods appear in elite graves and settlement sites. Some British nobles acquired Roman citizenship and sent their children to be educated in Gaul or even Rome itself. These cultural ambassadors returned home with new ideas about law, government, and urban living. The influence flowed both ways. Celtic artistic styles influenced Roman craftwork produced in Gaul, and Celtic military techniques impressed Roman observers. Caesar's accounts of British war chariots describe tactics that Romans found both terrifying and effective. British warriors fought from light, mobile platforms that allowed them to combine the speed of cavalry with the stability of infantry, an innovation that Romans eventually adopted for their own use. Trade relationships created complex networks of obligation and alliance that crossed tribal boundaries. British metals, iron, copper, tin, and gold, were essential to Roman military production. In exchange, Romans provided manufactured goods, wine, and luxury items that became symbols of status in British society. These economic relationships created political pressures that made outright Roman conquest almost inevitable. Some British communities actively courted Roman favor, seeing alliance as a path to greater power over their neighbors. The Aderbates, under King Verica, became Roman clients, adopting Roman-style coinage and government structures decades before conquest. These collaborative relationships created the political framework that would facilitate Roman administration after military victory. Other communities saw Roman influence as a threat to traditional culture and organized resistance networks that would persist throughout the Roman period. The Druids, in particular, opposed Roman expansion because it threatened their role as judges, teachers, and spiritual leaders. Their resistance helped unite diverse tribes in common cause against foreign domination. By 50 CE, Britain stood at a historical crossroads. The island contained sophisticated societies with complex political systems, extensive trade networks, and remarkable cultural achievements. Yet, these same advances had created conditions that made Roman conquest both attractive to Romans and feasible from a military perspective. The political landscape was fragmented, but not chaotic. Major tribal confederations controlled large territories through systems of alliance and clientage that resembled later feudal arrangements. Kings like Cunobelinus of the Catavelani wielded authority comparable to continental Celtic rulers, commanding loyalty from dozens of smaller communities through combinations of military power, economic control, and religious authority. These kingdoms possessed the resources to resist Roman invasion effectively. If they could unite, British metalworkers produced weapons equal to Roman equipment. British warriors had proven their courage and skill in generations of intertribal warfare. British Hillforts provided defensive positions that could withstand siege warfare using contemporary technology. But unity proved impossible to achieve. Traditional rivalries, competing territorial claims, and different responses to Roman influence prevented effective coordination. Some tribes saw Roman invasion as an opportunity to settle scores with traditional enemies. Others hoped to preserve their autonomy by demonstrating loyalty to potential Roman overlords. The economy of pre-conquest Britain was sophisticated enough to support Roman administration, but not so developed as to resist economic integration. British communities produced agricultural surpluses that could feed Roman armies and administrators. They had experience with monetary systems that could be adapted to Roman currency. They possessed craft industries that could be incorporated into imperial production networks. Most importantly, British society already contained elements that Romans could work with: urban settlements, hierarchical political structures, and elites familiar with Mediterranean culture through trade and diplomacy. Romans wouldn't need to impose completely foreign systems. They could build upon existing institutions and gradually transform them according to imperial needs. As our journey through ancient Britain draws toward its close, it's worth reflecting on what these thousands of years of prehistory created. When Roman legions finally landed in 43 CE, they didn't encounter primitive barbarians. They found sophisticated societies with remarkable achievements in art, architecture, technology, and social organization. The monument builders of Neolithic Britain created architectural achievements that still inspire wonder today. And the Great Passage graves demonstrate mathematical and astronomical knowledge that would be surpassed until the medieval period. These were on just piles of stone. They were complex machines designed to track celestial movements and create powerful spiritual experiences. The agricultural systems developed during the Neolithic and Bronze Ages established land use patterns that persisted for millennia. Field boundaries established 4,000 years ago still influence modern property lines. Settlements founded in prehistoric times became Roman towns, Saxon villages, and eventually modern cities. The basic framework of British settlement patterns was established long before recorded history began. Celtic artistic traditions survived Roman conquest, Saxon invasion, and Viking raids to emerge in medieval manuscript, illumination, stone carving, and metalwork. The spirals and interlaced patterns that decorated Iron Age torques and shields became the visual language of Christian art in Britain and Ireland. Ancient spiritual connections to landscape and natural cycles influenced folk traditions that persist even today. Perhaps most importantly, these ancient communities developed social technologies, ways of organizing cooperation, resolving disputes, and making collective decisions that influenced later British institutions. The tribal assemblies that governed Iron Age communities contributed to traditions of local self-government that would eventually evolve into parliamentary democracy. The genetic legacy is equally profound. Modern British people are largely descended from these ancient communities. The farmers who cleared the first fields, the craftspeople who built the first monuments, the warriors who defended the first hill forts. Their DNA flows in modern British veins, connecting contemporary communities to ancestors stretching back thousands of years. What can we modern people learn from our journey through ancient Britain? Perhaps the most striking lesson is how much human nature remains constant across millennia. The same drives that motivated Neolithic monument builders. The desire to create something lasting, to connect with cosmic rhythms, to build for future generations, still motivate people today. The challenges these ancient communities faced weren't so different from ours. They dealt with climate change as ice ages ended and new weather patterns emerged. They managed resource scarcity through cooperation and technological innovation. They balanced individual desires with community needs through legal systems and social customs. They integrated foreign influences while preserving cultural identity. Their solutions weren't always successful, but they were often ingenious. The field systems of Bronze Age Britain managed common resources through community agreements that balanced individual family needs with collective sustainability. The hill fort confederations of Iron Age Britain created defensive alliances while preserving local autonomy. The trading networks that connected Celtic communities maintained cultural exchange across vast distances without destroying local distinctiveness. These ancient people also faced the eternal human challenge of finding meaning in existence. Their monuments, artworks, and burial practices reflect profound spiritual seeking. They developed complex mythologies to explain natural phenomena, elaborate ceremonies to mark life transitions, and artistic traditions that expressed their deepest values and beliefs. What's perhaps most remarkable is their patience with long-term projects. Modern society often focuses on immediate results, but these ancient communities planned and built for centuries. Stonehenge took 1,500 years to reach its final form. The causewayed enclosures served communities for over a millennium. The field systems established in Bronze Age Britain remained in use until medieval times. This long-term thinking enabled achievements that would have been impossible for individuals or single generations. It required trust, confidence that future communities would continue and complete projects begun by their ancestors. It required shared vision, agreement about what was worth building that could transcend the immediate concerns of daily survival. As we reach the end of our peaceful journey through ancient Britain, I hope you feel the same sense of connection to these distant ancestors that I experience every time I explore their stories. They weren't so different from us. They loved their children, worried about the future, took pride in their work, and sought meaning in their brief time on earth. Their legacy surrounds us every day, often in ways we don't recognize. The English language contains Celtic words that were ancient when Romans arrived. British place names preserve tribal territories and sacred sites established millennia ago. The very landscape we inhabit was shaped by their agricultural systems, settlement patterns, and monument building. But perhaps their greatest gift to us is inspiration. In an age when we often feel overwhelmed by rapid change and uncertain about the future, these ancient people remind us that humans have always faced challenges and found ways to survive and thrive. They show us that cooperation, creativity, and long-term thinking can accomplish remarkable things. They also remind us that every generation is part of a continuing story. Just as we benefit from their innovations and achievements, future generations will inherit whatever we choose to build or preserve. The monuments we create today, whether physical structures or social institutions, will influence communities we'll never meet. Just as ancient Britain influences us. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time. If these gentle historical explorations bring you peace and perspective, I'd be grateful for your like and subscription. Your support helps me continue creating these thoughtful journeys through history's quieter moments. I'm always curious to hear which periods and stories resonate most with you. What aspects of ancient Britain surprised you? Which achievements impressed you most? Are there other historical periods you'd like to explore together? Your comments guide these videos and create the wonderful community discussions that make this channel special. As you prepare for sleep, perhaps you can imagine yourself standing in one of these ancient landscapes. Maybe you're watching dawn break over Stonehenge, participating in a ceremony that connects you to cosmic rhythms older than recorded history. Or perhaps you're walking along the sweet track through misty Somerset marshlands, following a path your ancestors built 6,000 years ago. These ancient people understood something we often forget in our busy modern lives, that we are part of something larger than ourselves, connected to both past and future by threads of inheritance and responsibility. Their monuments endure not just as archaeological curiosities, but as reminders that humans have always been capable of creating beauty, meaning, and lasting value. Thank you for listening. I hope this story brought you peace and relaxation. Sleep well, and remember, history will always be here for you whenever you need comfort. Rest peacefully in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow brings, our species has faced and overcome countless obstacles through creativity, cooperation, and hope. The same resourcefulness that built Stonehenge and cleared the first fields continues to flow in human hearts today. Sweet dreams, and thank you for sharing this gentle journey through ancient Britain's timeless stories.